What do you mean obscure? That was the hit TV show of 2020.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Listography. Jason, Joe, and Krams are here, and we are kicking off White Stripes Week. We are ranking their studio albums today, and they've got 6 of them. Any initial thoughts before we get into the rankings?
This might be the first video we do where none of us are like really gung-ho. Is that correct? No big White Stripers here?
I'm a casual fan, but I can't say... I've never been to a White Stripes show. I've never bought one of their albums. Just, I enjoy them, but I always thought they were a little overrated, especially Elephant. I never got Elephant. And I always kind of resented them a little bit because the music press was just so in love with them. It always made me feel like I was missing something, but I think they're just, they're a good band. I don't think they're bad or anything. They're good. They're not like an all-timer or anything.
Yeah, I'm with you. The hype train, when it was taking off in the early 2000s, I didn't get on board, and I really hated the rhetoric of them being the second coming of classic rock. And at that time, I was diehard classic hard rock and classic rock, and the newer stuff I liked was more experimental. So when people tried to jam this down my throat or thought I was ignorant for not falling in love with it, I was like, just relax a little bit. But I didn't dislike this as much as I was worried I would. Still don't like them that much. They're decent. It's really a case of small doses for me. I'd rather listen to just a handful of songs. And then if I can't just do that, just one album. But, doing all 6, not going to reach for maybe any of these again. None of them were really, down in the well, terrible stuff, but none of it really runs right through the middle of my enjoyment, like just decent. I can listen to it. And then for the album rankings, I was just telling Jason, number 1 and 6, not that far apart for me. It's kind of just throw a 6-headed coin up in the air and see what you get.
Yeah, I'm kind of there with you. I'm pretty indifferent. I think they're good. I like them, but at the same time, they don't excite me that much. Good to throw a song in here and there, but listening to a whole bunch of them at once like we just did was a little taxing because there's not that much variety in their catalog, but is what it is. We'll get into it. Who wants to start off?
Yeah, like you guys were saying, it's like their 6th album. I think they're all good. I think they're all well made. I think Jack White's a skilled guitarist. He's a skilled songwriter. But it really just comes down to my preference for this kind of music. And it's tough when it's just a guitar, a little bit of piano, drums, which are pretty rudimentary, and whatever, Jack White does with his, tone. So there's just not the variety that really attracts me to a band. My 6 is going to be Icky Thump, and it's a fine album. I really like the guitar tone on the title track. I think it's very cool sounding. I remember hearing it on the radio back when it came out, and I was, very intrigued. I thought it was cool. I thought it unique. I like that Jack White is always experimenting, looking for something a little different. It's hard to turn this type of music into something different than what it is. It's at its core just Delta blues with a little grunge, a little Detroit, MC5 influence, stuff like that. But this one, I think it just comes down to the songs. Other than Icky Thump, nothing really that stands out to me. Rag and Bones, okay, but when I was going through this, You Don't Know What Love Is just kind of like a continuation of the same song. Like a lot of my biggest problem with White Stripes is probably I've heard these songs before on previous albums, and you're really listening to them back to back. You really kind of pick up on it. You Don't Know What Love Is, You Just Do What You're Told sounds pretty much exactly like Dead Leaves in the Dirty Ground.
Are you saying that the White Stripes sound like AC/DC, who sound like Oasis?
A little bit. It's a little bit of that even like some of the riffs, like just the way the songs progress, it's too similar to other stuff. And this one, maybe just because it's the last one, I've already heard 5 others that kind of sound the same. None of these songs stuck for me. I don't think they're bad. I just think they're, the magic is gone. The sort of surprise of hearing something like Fell in Love with a Girl for the first time, which really didn't sound like anything that came out at the time. But by this point, it's like, okay, we've heard this before. It's kind of same old song and dance. So it was an okay album, but I think it's probably their worst.
I disagree. My number 6 is going to be Get Behind Me, Satan. I really applaud it for being probably the most different of all of them. It's probably the one that is farthest from that really raw garage rock, stripped down, self-titled. He's got a lot of songs that he's writing with marimbas. There's a lot of piano on this. The electric guitar really kind of goes on the back burner. But even though I like what they're trying here, I don't really think it works. I'll kind of argue against this, where I think that I'll argue on some albums that they need to be more creative and try different stuff. And they did that here, but it was the wrong stuff to try. I feel like I don't think he's got the vocals to pull off this album, or at least for me. It's a little bit too melodic for his style. I don't think he's got the pop sense to pull it off. And some of these songs I thought were really nagging and annoying, like My Doorbell with the piano. I thought Little Ghost was really annoying. White Moon is, I think, a little bit out of their element. Then when you get to a song like Instinct Blues, which is their more style, this is the 5th album in their catalog, and you're like, okay, this is the White Stripes I know. And I kind of know it too well. Like Joe was saying, a lot of it just seems recycled over and over again. I think he's an overrated guitar player, but I think he's a fine guitar player. I think he was really refreshing for that sound when they debuted. So I like his taste in music probably more than anything I like about the band itself. But I'm not crazy about this album. But that said, it's not too bad. I probably give all of these albums either 2.5 or 3 stars. Is like literally that's the range it's at from best to worst. So I can listen to it. Just the odd production of it on here doesn't really do it for me. And I think it's just kind of a dull ride from start to finish. It doesn't have as many ups and downs as the other ones, as far as, banging tempo, crashing, thunderous stuff, and then, cooler stuff. This one kind of just sits and lays on top of the water and doesn't move with any wave whatsoever. So I got Get Behind Me, Satan at number 6.
Well, we've got 3 different ones at the bottom. For me, like I said, there's not a huge difference between the 6, but I think 6 is clearly 6, whereas maybe the other 5 I could flip around in different orders. But I think easily the worst for me would be the self-titled, The White Stripes. I think it's the most raw and visceral, but also the least interesting. They just kind of bash their way through it. There's not much in the way of melodies. There's not much in the way of like swagger or groove. It's just kind of this block of sound. It kind of establishes their sound, but that's all it establishes. There's not much in the way of songs, and not much here that sticks in my mind very much as far as like hooks or melodies. So easily at the bottom for me. I think all of their other albums at least have songs that are hummable or memorable, and this one doesn't have much of that for me.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that. Which is why it's my number 5. I think it's an interesting sound. I like the covers. I really like the cover of the Robert Johnson song, Stop Breaking Down. I think that's probably the best track on the album. I like Cannon, which borrows from Son House's John the Revelator. Bob Dylan cover, not so much. One More Cup of Coffee. And I like the slide guitar. I like the stripped down, rootsy blues, Delta blues kind of stuff. And you can really tell that Jack White has talent, I think, on this. But like Jason said, the songs just aren't fully formed. There's nothing here. And the Big Three Killed My Baby might be the best written of his own songs on here. And it's still sort of, it's not like a pop song. It's just sort of him aping the blues structure a little bit. And it's fine. It's interesting. But yeah, there's just not enough songs here. It's interesting. I like hearing it. I think it's interesting to hear how they started and how stripped down everything was in the beginning. but they would obviously get better very, very quickly, I think. So, number 5 for me is the debut.
Yep. Let's keep talking about it. I got the debut at number 5 as well. You guys hit it out of the park. Just simply needs more stuff to it. And no one's ever going to say that Meg White is a great drummer, but even on this one, it is just way too elementary. Like Jason was saying, it just bashes and bashes and just becomes kind of a wall of noise. I understand that it establishes their sound, but it still needs a little bit more. And, you know, as far as the established sound, why I won't fall in love with it is it is really derivative and it just needs more stuff. The songs really blend together. You know, none of the songs I think are even over 3.5 minutes. There's 17 of them, and it still feels a little long to me. It probably should be condensed down and just be more of a quick introduction to what their sound is. But I did get a couple of songs that I actually really liked on it. I really liked Susie Lee, and I liked Astro quite a bit. But other than that, yeah, not a whole lot to work with here. Number 5, the self-titled White Stripes.
My number 5 is Stijl, and this is their second album, and I think it's a good step forward from the first. There's a bit more finesse in the arrangements. There's some acoustic guitar coming in here and there. The mix is less in your face, which I think works in its favor. It's not so much like this big compressed block of noise coming at you. It's a little more dynamic, and I think that sort of helps them with sort of achieving that retro sound that they're going for. I think it sounds a little bit more old-fashioned, and it works with, you know, what they're doing musically. Like I said, the songwriting is better as well. Your Southern Can Is Mine, the closing track's probably my favorite on it. And I tend to favor their tracks that are maybe a little more acoustic or folky, kind of that indie folk sound that they do once in a while. There's usually like a couple of those tracks per album, and those tend to be my favorites. That's my favorite on this record. It's a step forward, but it's still not great. There's still a lot of sort of nondescript blues rock numbers on this one. So number 5 for me.
Way off on that one, Jason. Way off. I'm disappointed to hear that one come out so soon. For me, I got Elephant at number 4. So when I talked about it, I think it's just horribly overrated. When it came out, I was an angry young man, and I couldn't understand what people were hearing with this. I get it a little bit better now. I still think Seven Nation Army's not a very good song. Perhaps the most overrated song in the history of music, but I think the rest of the album's pretty good. I really like Black Math a lot. It's actually sounds kind of like Motorhead. It's got a real kind of almost metal sound, fast guitar. I love the guitar tone on that one, but I don't like the cutesy stuff. I really don't like Well, It's True That We Love One Another at the end. Girl, You Have No Faith in Medicine doesn't do it for me. Ball and Biscuit's okay, has a cool guitar sound, sort of a showcase for Jack White, but it's too long. Hardest Button to Button doesn't do it for me very much. I don't know. It's when it seems a little too self-consciously like indie and cutesy. Not enough of the blues, sort of moving away from that on every subsequent album from their debut. So this one just doesn't get too much praise from me. I think it's all right. It has certainly a lot more structure and more songs and more interesting sort of tones and everything than the debut. So I have it above that, but not high above that one. It's pretty close.
All right. My number 4 is going to be White Blood Cells. This is the first one to really make like a conscious effort to get rid of that Delta blues sound, which kind of brings some good and bad. I think there's a lot more focus on songwriting here. I think with Stijl, the second one, they really wanted to get a little more creative with their arrangements and their sound, which I think they did. Here, I feel like they're focusing on the songwriting a little more, which sometimes really works, sometimes it doesn't. Fell in Love with a Girl is great. We're Gonna Be Friends. I think I Smell a Rat is really underrated, especially because he's really just using the guitar to scribe this, like get this mood going. But then there's a lot of stuff where you can tell he's still trying to do that, but it just really fails. I think some of the more tedious stuff is on this album. I Can Learn, Little Room. A lot of it is just really dull for me, and it's just too thin of a sound for like I think what he's hearing in his head almost. So this one was a tough one to place because I do think there's a bunch of pretty darn good tracks on here. But for a 16-song album, the percentage for me of good stuff isn't there. So good highs, not so good lows. And yeah, I've got it at number 4, White Blood Cells.
White Blood Cells is also my number 4. So for me, they're getting a little better with each record here at the beginning of their career, just growing as a songwriter with every record. And I think, like Cram said, the highs on this record are pretty darn good. The songwriting is, getting to a pretty high level here and there on the record. But I think there's still too much blues on this record for my taste. So where Joe's maybe upset with Elephant getting away from the blues, I can't get rid of the blues fast enough. Just to me, that's the most boring stuff they do. Like, I've heard the blues before, I'll do something else. I love Hotel Yorba, one of my favorite White Stripes songs. Fell in Love with a Girl is great. We're Going to Be Friends is great. But all this other kind of just run-of-the-mill, cookie-cutter kind of sound that he just churns out over and over again. It's like, okay, we've done this. Let's do something else. So for me, pretty much sounds like the same way that Cram feels with this record. Number 4.
I hate that I'm in tune with Pitchfork on all this. It's very upsetting to me.
The one band that you would line up with Pitchfork is friggin' the White Stripes.
Surprisingly, they really love the early stuff. I was taken aback when I was reading some of the reviews.
Well, and Pitchfork was only 7 or 8 years old at the time and really starting to get hot. I think I don't want to put words in their mouth. Maybe they were just trying to get as many readers as they could. But yeah, they do have really good scores on Pitchfork, which is surprising.
Except Elephant. Elephant's pretty 6.9, I believe. My number 3 is going to be Get Behind Me, Satan. I think this is probably their most varied, most interesting album. I like both of the singles, Blue Orchid and My Doorbell, a lot. They definitely, in the beginning, the first couple albums, you could really tell the Zeppelin influence, both on his vocal styles and on his guitar. And I think they kind of got away from that by the time White Blood Cells hit. But now they're kind of back experimenting a little bit. Something like Little Ghost has that Zeppelin vibe. Red Rain has some of that bluesy vibe, which was missing from the last 2 albums. Again, it's hard to do a lot of different stuff with just a guitar and drums. I think the piano that they add in here sounds nice. I wish they would actually do more piano. At least then you get a little bit of that bass sound. I like the acoustic stuff on here. I really like the closer, I'm Lonely, but I Ain't That Lonely Yet. And I think the songs, I just liked them a little bit more than on Elephant. Thought they were a little more interesting. A little less of that cutesy indie rock, I want to be in a Wes Anderson movie that they were getting into, a little too much for my taste. So this is a nice comeback a little bit from Elephant for me.
All right, my number 3 is Icky Thump, which I would probably say is the best sounding album they've got. It doesn't have that in your face higher end to it. It's nice and rounded out. And after my least favorite, Get Behind Me, Satan, they did kind of go back to a little bit more of their older ways, but they did kind of stylize it more and didn't just do like that raw garage sound like on the first couple albums. This one's got a lot of cool stuff, especially like right off the opening track, like that like electro keyboard sounding guitar solo type stuff on the self-titled or the title track. It's awesome. I really like You Don't Know What Love Is. I think it's really melodic. I think this would have been a good album for them to get into some new territory had they kept releasing stuff. Conquest is kind of cool. Rag and Bone, I'm Slowly Turning Into You. The lows aren't too low on here for me, and I think he kind of lets the electric guitar take over the album in a lot of spots like he wasn't really doing in the last few. And also kind of this and probably the next album I'm going to talk about are probably my favorite vocal performances, even though I'm not crazy about him as a lead singer. I think when he's operating nice right in the middle, I think he gets too cutesy on Get Behind Me, Satan a little bit in some spots. I think he's too raw on the original stuff. So I feel like this is right in the middle, and that's just fine for me. So I'm going with Icky Thump at number 3.
All right, my number 3 is going to be Get Behind Me, Satan. I think this is where you can sort of see Jack's starting to feel maybe a little boxed in by the blues and trying to push out of it a bit. And his way of doing that is by playing less guitar and a lot more piano. I think at least half of the songs, maybe even more, have piano as the main instrument. And then there's the nurse, which is mainly played on marimba, as Cram alluded to. And I think it's a nice break from the blues forwardness of the first three records. But there's still not a lot of variety here. A lot of the tracks sound the same. All these piano songs that he wrote all sound the same. So it's not like a huge breath of fresh air. I will say, though, that Blue Orchid is awesome. It is the song that Seven Nation Army wishes it was. Awesome riff. I like My Doorbell a lot. Denial Twist is cool. I'm Lonely, but I Ain't That Lonely Yet. So there are a decent amount of good songs on this. Good enough to get it up to number 3 for me, but still just leaves me wanting more.
The whole damn thing leaves me wanting more. All my whole experience.
Moving on to my number 2. Remember when this album came out in 2001, and I guess it didn't really hit until they released Fell in Love with a Girl, which was 2002-ish. I remember hearing that on the radio, and it's like, wow, this is awesome. I've never heard anything like this on the X before, the local alternative radio station. And I remember getting white blood cells or burning it from somebody. And I was hoping to hear like 15 tracks just like Fell in Love with a Girl, that garage, raw, fast sound. Totally disappointed me because nothing else at all sounds like that in their entire catalog, really. Which is a little bit of a bummer, but as I've grown and matured, came back to this one, like a lot more. I think Dead Leaves on Dirty Ground is good, very bluesy, very much, what the Black Keys want their entire blah to sound like, basically borrowed from that, it feels like. But Hotel Yorba is a nice little change up. They're getting away from the pure kind of blues, Led Zeppelin worship, 60s kind of worship of distilled, and experimenting a little bit. I'm Finding It Hard to Be a Gentleman kind of sets the tone for that kind of mid-tempo song that they would repeat on every album, to diminishing returns, in my opinion. We're Gonna Be Friends is that sort of cutesy, we're going to be on, the next Wes Anderson indie movie.
It's in Napoleon Dynamite, not Wes Anderson.
It's probably, it has to be in a Wes Anderson movie somewhere. I'll look that up later. I Think I Smell a Rat and Fend in Every Way is all good. Like This Protector, The Closer, all kind of piano, has a big sound. Sounds cool. I think all the songs are pretty good. It's another, White Stripes do not skimp on the tracks. This is 16 tracks. It's a brisk 40 minutes because most of their songs are short. The best thing I can say about the White Stripes is they don't, for the most part, take those blues sort of repetitions into the 5 and 7 minute mark where it's just like, please end. They get to the end of the songs. They're punctual like that. So I think this is just a good album all the way through. Lots of variety, and my number 2.
A good long blues album doesn't bother me as much, but it probably would bother me if the White Stripes are doing, because he doesn't have the guitar tone to listen to him solo really for 4 minutes at a time. So yeah, I get what you're saying there. Let's see. Yeah, I do remember hearing that song when it came out. And like I said, like I never really got into this whole early 2000s, like stripped down rock move. It was talk about this a lot on the channel, like stuff we feel like we should have been into given our personalities. And like, this wasn't. I never got into like Wolf Mother or Jet or any of these bands that were really trying to just sound like old school rock. I never disliked it, but never really caught on that much. All right, my number 2, I like a lot and was tinkering with maybe putting it at number 1. I've got De Stijl. I think that's how I'm going to say it. De Stijl. I kind of have these tendencies with how my list works is they do something and then they do a little bit better, and I like that, and then they kind of lose that spark, and then they kind of get it back. So all my like even albums here are the ones that I think they're like growing on. And this is like right in between White Blood Cells and the self-titled, where I don't think they lose a lot of that raw Delta blues style, but they also expand on it a lot before they really start erasing it. And the songwriting here, for still being like a really stripped down garage rock revival, is so much better than the first one, I think. I think You're Pretty Good Looking for a Girl is just awesome. Hello Operator is great. Apple Blossom, Death Letter, just a lot of really good rock and roll songs. So it's pretty simple. They're gonna, try a lot of different stuff later on in their timeline, like I talked about. But this one is just kind of nice and to the point. I think better vocals right off the start. And then, pleasant new variety that even the little touches that you don't have, like some bass and some piano and stuff like that. So yeah, like even I'm Bound to Pick It Up has a really nice melody. I think he's just really getting his wings under him here as a writer, and the sound was still nice and edgy and youthful to really make it a pretty good listen. So my number 2, Stijl.
Okay, my number 2 is a record that I think a lot of people put either at the very bottom or maybe bottom 2 spots. Joe's not alone in that, but I have Icky Thump at number 2. I agree with Cram. I think it's their best sounding record. This one comes 1 year after the first Raconteurs record, and you can definitely hear that influencing this. I don't know if maybe some of these tracks were left over from those sessions or if he was just sort of in that mode of writing, but I like that. It's a little more varied, a little more adventurous. Tracks like Conquest or Little Cream Soda, Rag and Bone, they have a lot more personality. They're a little odd and maybe a little weird, and maybe that's what some people don't like about them. But for me, that's what I like. I like a little weirdness. I'm not that interested in just hearing straight blues over and over again. So for me, this is the most varied, the most sonically interesting. I think his guitar tone on this album is awesome, especially in his solos, just that real squealing type of screaming tone. I think it's great. There's a lot of really good songs on it. This record in some ways kind of reminds me of Physical Graffiti. It has some of this like Eastern influence, like on Icky Thump. It's very varied, and I think, obviously it's not a double record and it's not as good, but there's a certain kinship that I can hear. Icky Thump's great, Conquest, Rag and Bone, Little Cream Soda, Effect and Cause, and 300 Mile Per Hour Torrential Outpour Blues are all awesome tracks, and I especially love the guitar in that last one. So number 2 for me, Icky Thump.
I can't agree with that one. I definitely hear Zeppelin influence on my number 1, the Stijl, whatever you want to call it. It's Dutch for the style. And this one for sure has the strong Zeppelin influence. You can hear some Houses of the Holy stuff on I'm Bound to Pick It Up and Apple Blossom. And I think this album really is darn good. The way it sort of incorporates the blues and the kind of rawness of the first one and adds a whole lot of stuff, in my opinion. It's still sort of garagey, but I heard a ton of the Animals on something like Apple Blossom. Even some Doors, which you don't hear a lot of Doors influence, but I definitely hear some Doors on this one as well. That late 60s sound, early 70s. There's more interesting. There's some piano on this one. There's acoustic. There's a little double bass even on this one. And I really like the sound of it. I like the slide guitar. I really like Jack White's playing on this. And I think it's by far their best for me. It's really the only one I really want to come back to a lot and listen to a whole album through. 2000, I don't know if it's going to make my top 5, but it's definitely a candidate for my album of the year. 2000's tough. I don't think it's going to make it, but I think this album rules, and it is their masterpiece. Me and Pitchfork agree.
As usual, my number 1 seems like Jason and I have the same one, probably for the same reasons. It is Elephant, which is Dutch for elephant. And we probably going to say the same things, I'm going to guess. Best songwriting. It's got that nice indie rock style to it. It has the least amount of their bad material, and everything else is kind of just, every little element's just kind of a little bit better on here. So it's everything coming together nice. However, Joe's right. Seven Nation Army. I won't say the most overrated song of all time. I got no problem with you saying that. I'd probably pick American Pie by Don McLean. I think that's the most overrated song of all time. Just wasn't interesting the first 7 seconds. Why do it 7 more, whatever hours it is? All right. But for this one, too many good songs for me for not to be the best. It's kind of as simple as that. I still don't think Seven Nation Army is terrible, but Black Math is cool. And The Cold Cold Night is really cool. Meg, I believe Meg is singing on it. And unless Jack had something done to his voice, I just don't know what to do with myself. If you got her in your pocket, Ball and Biscuit, I think, is everything Seven Nation Army probably wants to be, and a million other songs. It's just really good. It's probably the most accessible, the most radio friendly, and just the best example of their style blended with writing ability. And there's not much else to say about it. I just think it's the best collection of good songs by the White Stripes.
Yep, I agree with that assessment pretty much totally. Not much else to add, but I will say that one thing I like about this record, from after the first 3, there's a notable uptick in the amount of fuzz that he's using on his guitar on this record, which I think is really cool. Just super fuzzed out some of the guitar tones on this record, which is awesome. But lots of good songs. The highest ratio of good to mediocre songs on this record. And I will reiterate what you guys both said, that Seven Nation Army is the least interesting song on this record.
Yeah. And not to spoil any potential album of the year, but none of these albums are going to have any candidacy whatsoever. They'll do about as well as Joe Exotic did in the libertarian gubernatorial candidacy he had back a few years ago. So not very good.
Let us know down below what you think of the White Stripes and how you rank their records. And we will be coming back at you tomorrow with our 10 favorite White Stripe songs each. Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and take a look down in the description. Find links to all of our social media accounts there. We will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.